Thanks for having me here. I know I'm here during the week a lot, so I don't necessarily see everyone, but I help manage this front garden here at Pearson. And a lot of what we grow goes to the food pantry of Native Health, which is a health and wellness center on Central and Indian School. And so things grow really great here at this location, largely because we get the irrigation too, so it's really grows wonderful. And so some of the things we do with the produce is also teaching people what to do with fresh produce and bounty, and how to cook with it and things too. And then kind of one passion of mine too is in how to preserve foods. And so that's what I was going to talk to today is how do you some different food preservation and sort of long-term storage tips and tricks. And so I have some show and tell of different ways to take advantage of what you grow in your garden, but also maybe thinking about like how to think about your garden differently, about other things that it gives you that maybe you're not taking advantage of. So here you probably heard that like the concept of food deserts and sort of so kind of this area until recently there's more grocery stores now, but is a food desert where there isn't like fresh access to fresh produce. But when you look around, there's like food everywhere around us. So it's also a passion of mine of just how to take advantage of wild foods and wild foraging foods too. And so the Sonoran Desert is actually not a food desert, but a foodie paradise. There's so much things to eat out there, and so many things like we're growing in the garden we can take advantage of and utilize, whether it's for food or medicine or just like sort of beautiful things we can sort of save. So that's what today is just going to go over some of the things that I do this time of year, and some different tips and tools and ways to kind of extend your harvest too. So we're going to talk about a little bit about canning, freezing, and dehydrating our foods as a way to preserve them. So I don't know if anyone grew up or like grandma like was a big canner and like saving everything and putting everything up and sort of that kind of Depression era mentality or saving next day. And a lot of us like with the pandemic and stuff realizing like grocery store shelves can be bare. And so there's some people who do food preservation, kind of that like prepper like attitude or like saving for the someday. I'm a canner or food preserver, less about like sort of that kind of hoarding mentality, but just like different ways you can eat things. And so I do a lot of canning, but I'm not necessarily trying to put up 40 pounds of tomatoes or something. It's just a way to say like, okay, I'm sick of eating zucchini. What is a way I can transform that zucchini into something else? And so you can get into canning or different food preservation as a way to just transform the harvest and sort of not get kind of burnt out on the same things over and over again. And so I do a lot of canning, and that's kind of a whole topic in of itself. But one great resource is this book. And so you can look through it, get some ideas. You can see all the tabs I have saved. These are recipes I've tried or things I want to try. Too. And so a lot of canning, you don't need 40 pounds of tomatoes to put up either. There's a lot of great recipes and things you can do. So one of the things I do with zucchini is I make zucchini relish, which is great on hot dogs and brats and burgers, and it's just great with cream cheese and crackers and things. And it's sort of a different way to kind of eat zucchini, the same thing than the same old. And you only need 3 cups of grated zucchini, so it's not even using like one giant zucchini. So it's a small batch recipe. So there's lots of great things to sort of transform the food in a different way. So this is a book I really recommend. I mean, Ball, of course, is like, some 150-year-old company at least, sort of the standard on canning. And so a lot of the stuff you can find online now too. And so if canning sort of scares you because of hot boiling water and hot jars and like the sterilization aspect of it, it's actually quite simple and pretty straightforward. And that's what's great about this book is it has lots of how-to steps and photos and things too with canning. And then if anyone's super interested in learning more about canning, through Native Health, we've done a series of YouTube videos and canning classes. And so I can share those resources and links with you. But I also love to can because it's like a social activity. And so something my mother-in-law, we do together, and my mom, it's like kind of getting together for an afternoon and a fun way to spend time together in the kitchen. So I'm not going to talk too much more about canning stuff, but I could talk about it all day, but we'll move on to other things. So freezing is another great way to preserve things as well. So it's hard to demonstrate some frozen things here today. But remember when we had all the kale and chard and like beets and all this like greens and stuff? And so how many people like froze anything of that? Like, and so come in a couple months, we're going to be devoid of all leafy greens, but if we preserved or froze some of them, we could have them like all year long. So greens like that, not lettuce so much, but a lot of the leafy greens freeze super well. And so if you make soups or smoothies and things like that, sort of throwing those frozen greens in, it's just like fresh. So it's a great way to preserve. One tip to do freezing is to do flash freezing, where you lay things on one layer and then you put it in a freezer bag, so that then when you want to take it out of the freezer bag, it's not all like stuck together in one big glob, that you froze in the pieces individually. And so then you can take them out individually too. And so freeze them in one layer on a sheet pan and then put them in a bag together. If you're a smoothie maker and like beet greens or kale things too, you can kind of freeze it in a big clump and then you just break off bits and pieces as you throw it in the blender. It doesn't really matter the shape so much anymore. It's more about having that that like green to add to it. And so many of those leafy greens too, you can dehydrate and make a lot of products too. So did anyone grow broccoli or cauliflower or anything like that? And so, you know, all those big leaves that come with that. So we're more interested in like the broccoli itself or the cauliflower, but all those leaves are edible too. And so that's what I mean about kind of looking at your garden of the other things it gives you. And so you can dehydrate or just simply air dry those leaves, throw them in a blender and pulverize them. And I didn't bring a jar of it. Make basically green powder. And so anytime you make a smoothie or make a soup, or spaghetti sauce, even hamburger helper, you can add some tablespoons of that green powder into the dish. And so that's a great way to add calcium, vitamin C, and those nutrients things too. And trust me, your family won't even know what's in there either. Especially like very saucy kinds of things, like it's a great way. And then you've taken all this biomass of the plant that you otherwise wouldn't eat and sort of done something with it. So at the very least, you should be composting those leaves and things too. There's a lot of like, as you garden, notice there's a lot of things growing that aren't necessarily the direct food, but we can still take advantage and use. So some other freezing tips, like this is a great little ice tray, and there's some other ones where you can freeze individual cubes. And so this works really well for like herbs. So right now I didn't pick any. There's a lot of fresh basil, and it goes to flower very quickly, and sort of you're not necessarily ready to use it. But what you can do is you can chop that basil, stick it in here, and then cover with like a little bit of olive oil, and stick those in the freezer. And then once it's frozen, you can pop them out and then put them in a Ziploc bag. And then you could even add a little chopped garlic to it and ready to go. And so then when you're making something that you want to add basil to, or add a little oil to the veggies you're kind of sauteing, then you can pop in one of those cubes and pop in some flavor. So you can do that with rosemary, oregano, or whatever, little cubes. And then the oil will sort of melt in the pan and add flavor to the dish. So I also do sometimes, you just want a little like tomato base. Tomatoes is kind of one of my favorite things to grow, and get a lot of tomatoes. So I picked 10 pounds of tomatoes last night. A lot of tomatoes. And so you can chop up or pulverize those and like freeze them in cubes. And then when you're doing different things, you can just pop those ice cubes in while cooking too. So freezing is like premium space in my house. I have a little freezer, but I'm getting a special deep freeze just for my little, it's like smaller than this, but it'll hold quite a bit. It's for all this like excess frozen stuff, because I just have tons of frozen things. So the oil will freeze and it'll be like a little ice cube.
Is there any particular oil?
No, well, probably olive oil is what most people are sort of using with cooking, but you could use avocado or coconut oil too, if that's like what you use. You remember, I've used coconut oil. Like now, it's like you always tell like the temperature change when your coconut oil turns to liquid versus solid is sort of changing of the season. So in the freezer, obviously, it would turn solid. Um, um, Not so much in the oil. If you were just to freeze basil, it does. Or like this is parsley, but some of those herbs, if you air dry them, they definitely turn like black and not good. So it's better with more of the what I call those leafy green herbs. If you want to preserve those, it's best like in a dehydrator or something where you can do it quicker. Um, you can do some oven dehydrating as well, but that I always find that's tricky because then it's like I don't know, it's just more keeping an eye on it or like don't trust the oven temperature. Where getting a tabletop dehydrator, you can get some good ones for like $35. You don't have to spend a $200. I think Excalibur is the brand. Like those are super fancy things. But so basil and parsley to dry is better to sort of do it quicker in a dehydrator versus like just air drying. So a lot of herbs air dry great too, but those are more. So we can switch to that. Those are more. This is the marjoram or oregano, thyme. Like the I don't know. This isn't a technical term. Like the more stemmy, sticky herbs that are just like a little hardier. Those air dry just fine, and don't really change color and flavor. This smells so good, and things too. Yeah, I don't think the flavor or anything. Yeah, and so it's certainly if you dehydrate, especially oven dehydrate, you can go too far, and so a lot of the commercial herbs you buy are sort of industrially like dried and things, and they don't have a lot of flavor. It's like too far, or it's really old stuff, and so the flavor and pungency isn't there. Uh, and so, I mean, fresh herbs is great to use, but the flavor kind of goes away as the older they get. So when you do dry herbs, you don't want to do like so much that it would last you 5 years, because then the flavor, aroma, and stuff is going to degrade over time, certainly. And so that's what if you are air drying or dehydrating, you want to make sure you're not taking it too far and dry before you put it in something for storage, so you just get it nice and kind of save that flavor. And so those hardier herbs, like I just picked this just now, you can easily just hang up in your kitchen to dry. You don't necessarily need a dehydrator. And so one tip is to use a rubber band, because as this dries, it's going to get smaller. And so you can kind of tighten the rubber band, or if we did a string, then they might start falling out too. And so as this dries, then it's going to get crunchy too, and might fall out. So one tip is to actually put it in a paper bag as it dries, just so then as parts of it start to dry and fall off, you're catching that. And so like in your kitchen cabinets, you have the handles, you could rig something up and just hang it on there, so it's getting some airflow. Paper bags are great for drying because it lets the air flow. Any kind of plastic bag or something is just going to mold that herb too. I have like a little bar thing I hang them on, but then like as they dry, because it looks really cool, but as they dry, like then it's getting all over the counter and stuff. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to be saying words, kind of making up words here. So, how much humidity should we leave in the plants? Not that I have like a humectometer at
Yeah.
home, but you kind of know if it's
Yeah.
half dry or 75% dry. Because you're right, we don't want it so it's crumbly. We want it dry enough.
And then when you put it, yeah.
What is that sweet spot of humidity?
Well, in Arizona, we don't really have to worry about it as much, that we're gonna like mold things. Where Minnesota, where it's 60% humidity just in the air, that's something we're doing a dehydrator or making sure. So here in Arizona right now, it's probably like 5% humidity, and like even in the monsoon, it's not that humid. I know it feels that way a lot, so we're not so worried. Things are gonna dry pretty quickly. But if you were to like oven dry or keep the dehydrator going for hours and hours, then you're getting like too dry things too. There's like ways you can do it by taking weight and and things and kind of testing. But I mean, that's beyond like what you need to do for home. So it's sort of like getting a feel for it. And then also when you do store things more long-term, monitoring that you don't have something that's like, maybe I put that in there too moist and it sort of went too far. Um, right. So that then you have stuff like growing in it and things. But in Arizona, we don't really have that like mold end of the spectrum. And it's in your home too. We're not like so dry that it's gonna like completely degrade or lose the flavor per se. I mean, I know it feels like an oven all the time, but it like is.
Can you jar that and it would be okay? Is that an okay
Now?
supplement?
No, this would mold.
Okay.
This I literally just picked before we started, too. So I should have brought like some. I mean, it'll be crispy in like a few days, and so like when you're cooking, you don't necessarily want the stick and stem. So when you're ready to cook, you can sort of shred it into a jar to make just loose leaves, and that's. I'm surprised I didn't bring one because that's more what I have is just jars of just the leaves, too, and so. So yeah, the bag kind of helps keep all those bits that fall off. Especially thyme is very like delicate and stuff. So a lot of those leaves fall off quickly. But like this is the mint. Two is a very fleshy leaf. You can dry that as well by hanging up. I did want to show this is air drying rack. So it has actually more levels too. And so I hang this. I always have like some project in the works, and so it's kind of annoying to my husband because I always have something that's, doing its thing. So they actually sell these. I wish I would have got that have an outer thing and then a zipper. So then you could put it more outside, and you wouldn't worry about the birds getting on it. I will say the birds are curious, and then they'll poop on stuff, and then, and then it's like, well, that was wasted, because then, you want to like wash and have everything ready to go, and obviously you wouldn't want birds to poop on it or just like be near it and stuff. And so that's why having the big enclosed with the zipper is really nice. So this I think was like $9 at Walmart or something. I found. I mean, it's sort of falling apart, but it's done me good. I do a lot of seed saving stuff too, and so I use this mainly for different seeds to air dry as well. So I have one of my community gardeners does this, and she does her kale just on this, and you can make kale chips like in the oven and add seasoning and salt and things. She just air dries it, and that's how she eats them. She doesn't do any salt or seasoning, and it's just air dried until they're crispy. I kind of like more the oven method when you can add lots of stuff to it and make it flavorful. But if you have fruit, you could do in this. And so what I often do is then I'll cut a parchment paper or something too, just so it has. But and some of them come different or a little like fancier. But in Arizona, where we have such dryness, something like this works pretty well. Like I said, some dehydrators you can get, Nesco brand is more like the $35 to $60 range for a good dehydrator. Then you get super fancy too. One other thing you may not think about dehydrating is making your own onion powder or onions. And so here, and I'm cool even the things if you want to come up, and this smells like really good. So these are dehydrated slices of the toy onions. So I don't know, did anyone grow these? Terry did. He's a big fan. I grow a lot of these. So these are toy onions, or I just picked these two. Or they're a bulbing onion, and they're technically a shallot, and so they grow pretty small. But all of this is edible. So you could dry these greens and then crunch them up and have sort of chives. Like some of the like seasoning mixes, Mrs. Dash's, all those always have like chives in them, and so you could kind of really get cool and make your own seasoning mixes. And so the greens you can harvest throughout their growing cycle, but they're kind of coming to the end and drying up, and so harvest a lot. But you plant one bulb, and I'm sure we have a bunch of these in the shed or something, but you plant one bulb, like you plant this end, and then it'll turn into like 15 to 25 onions. And so you can just pick them as you need them, fresh. It's kind of annoying. It's a little small to chop up, but great. And so all I did for this was just take the bottom part, slice it thin, and then I threw it in the dehydrator. And I love doing this. So when you're cooking and trying to get stuff done and there's a lot of chopping and prepping, I just throw this in. It kind of rehydrates and adds a lot of flavor. If we also just blended this up, we'd have onion powder too. And so you can do the same with garlic stuff as well. And then I haven't used it as much, but the greens I have dehydrated for more the chivy flavor, or it's a little more fresh kind of flavor. So if you make like any kind of dips and stuff with sour cream or cream cheese, it's a great way to add flavor. Dill is another great one to dry. It's probably too hot now that anyone has any dill, but dill dries really great too. And then you can also dry the dill seed and use that in cooking too. So these onions are great. Everyone should have them growing in their garden. Onions repel a lot of pests and stuff too, but these are so prolific and multiply. Like I said, I only picked a few on the outside, but I have a whole cluster. And so usually we plant them in like August, September. They're E-toy onions. So E-toy, it's E-I-apostrophe-I-T-O-I. And that is an autumn word, the local Pima language that is the creator deity. So you maybe seen the man in the maze symbolism with Pima people. So that man is E-toy. He's the elder brother. So
I should pull them.
Yeah, well, so you could either wait till this totally dries and flops over. That's what I did with some of these and things. I pull them and then use the tops, and then we just kind of dry these in a paper bag and plant them next year.
Right. You told me I just cut off the end.
Yeah, you just need this little.
But I should wait until August
to pull them or to plant them. Yeah, wait till so the onion will tell you when it's ready. They'll start to sprout. You can't kill these. So the other thing is every gardener should have these because you'll feel like I did amazing. So like I've had little dehydrated ones in a drawer and threw them in the ground, and it's like they started growing. So things, but these are nice and fresh, like a good. So these are a little more purple. Some aren't as purple. They sort of vary, and that's what I liked the look of those. So I didn't end up pulverizing them for like onion powder, but I like just using this and kind of these are not a wild onion, but they kind of took the niche of a wild onion of in Arizona, and so that's why they're called E-toy onions. So probably Jesuit priests brought them from Europe, and so autumn people kind of grew them all over. It sort of kind of took a niche of a lot of wild onions, and so you can find them everywhere now. Yeah, like locally, you can find them at the farmers market. Sometimes you pick them up. Native Seed Search out of Tucson sells them. I probably have 1,000 bulbs out there right now. So and so once you grow them, you'll never not have them. And so like a lot of gardener exchanges, and they're just kind of around. People have them. So
Lori just come see me.
yeah. It's sort of become, and then they've spread across the country and things too. Chilies, a lot of people grow chilies. So a lot of chilies are really conducive to drying. These are Del Arbol chilies. So they're small, really thin-walled chilies. You can dehydrate like jalapenos or more fleshy peppers. Would not air dry. They'd be too fleshy and could mold before you like get them dry enough. So that's what you'd need, a dehydrator or oven drying. And then you can pulverize like dried jalapenos and add that in cooking too. Or make jalapeno powder, or like Anaheim chili powder is really good. So these whole ones are great because then you can just throw them in whole. I didn't bring it. I make my own red pepper flakes. And so when jalapenos are fully ripe, they turn red. And so if you dehydrate those, or Anaheims when fully ripe will turn red. So I just kind of do it a mix of all the different peppers. Dehydrate that and then pulverize it and make powder, but I kind of just use a mortar and pestle and make more of a red pepper flake. It smells so much better, fresher. So so great. So when dry, then I store in mason jars, and these plastic lids are great because it's, especially if you have anything liquidy or just for reusing, it's easier than the other lids that come with the jars. I mean, you can buy these on Amazon, come in all the different sizes, and so they're great for reusing, and have a good seal on them too. And so one thing I do, I guess I didn't bring the dried red pepper flakes, but you can see some in here, is I make chili salt. And so you can make lots of flavored salts. You could do rosemary salt, lemon peel salt, lots of great things to elevate your cooking. So these chilies in here are actually chiltepines. They're only about this big. They're really small chilies. I have a bush out there if someone's interested, I can show you. And a coarse ground salt, and just like mixing it together, and it adds a nice heat and smokiness, and sort of has a different way to cook things. So I have lots of different flavored salts to use. Two tomatoes. These are cherry tomatoes. Oh, this smells good, so you have to come up and it's like so good. These are cherry tomatoes, just dehydrated in the food dehydrator. I had, like I said, I harvested 10 pounds yesterday. Like I harvested 17 pounds a couple weeks ago, and it's like I didn't even have time or bother to cut these in half, so I just like dehydrated them whole. And so this is one where it's like they're dry, but I want to watch the moisture content. Those are, when you buy shoes, you get that little silicone pack and stuff. Like those still work. So you could, if you feel comfortable putting it next to your food. You can also buy food grade. I like the recycling aspect, but you can also buy. Thank you. You can also buy like food grade silica packs and stuff to put in with your things, and it just kind of draws any excess moisture. Well, I'm not going to eat the silica pellet. I'm just like, it's like in a little paper. Yeah, it's a little paper envelope around it and stuff too. So I don't mind too much. And so before you dehydrate anything, you want to make sure this stuff is washed and like clean too. Oh, so when I do different pasta dishes, like, so these dehydrate, and you can smell them, like they're like little tomato flavor bombs. And so
You don't rehydrate them before you put it in.
no, I'd probably, if I were to do, like, so I do a lot of like summer squash saute, or like with garlic and different peppers, veggies, and then spaghetti. So it's not really a sauce thing, but then we'll do some of these, and that is one dish I do. Any soup that's tomato based, if you throw these in, it'll just really punch up. Because if you have like a can of diced tomatoes, they have no flavor, right? And so these, you want to punch up that tomato flavor. And so it's also too, instead of letting those tomatoes just rot, let's try to preserve them or do something with them. One of my favorite things to can and with tomatoes is to make tomato jam. So it's not like jam you do like peanut butter and jelly kind of jam. It's like a very savory jam. It's got ginger in it, and it's like, oh, it's so yummy. So you just eat it with like cheese and crackers, and so that's or like on a burger, really good. So it's a way to use up excess cherry tomatoes. So you don't necessarily ketchup, yeah, kind of, but with spices in it. And so you can make your own harissa sauce. I mean, there's like, that's what I get into canning, is like the different transformative things, and not just like putting up 40 pounds of diced tomatoes isn't appealing to me. That's a lot of work and chopping, but I like when you can make something else. So one last thing. Oh, this is dehydrated teas. So many flowers and plants you can dehydrate for tea. Did you know you can have marjoram tea? It's really good. Lots of health benefits of different teas. This is Jamaica or hibiscus tea, which is something maybe we should grow here. Or Roselle, it's called, is great. So that's done in the dehydrator. Another thing, last thing to wrap up, is to preserve things that aren't necessarily food, but medicine or just beauty. And so this I have soaking in oil. This is avocado oil with calendula and chamomile. So you saw out here a while ago, there's tons of white little daisies. That's chamomile, which you can dehydrate and use for tea. The calendula is a bright orange flower. And that's very medicinal. It's antibacterial, antifungal. It's like neosporin things. And so then we can take this oil, strain this off, so it's got a very orangey texture, strain it off, and then add with some beeswax and make calendula salve. And so then we can use this kind of like neosporin. And you can infuse all kinds of plants in oils to make salves and medicines too. And then final thing I want to show is just kind of to preserve some of your harvests. So you know all the beautiful flowers we have all over Pearson. So I took some of the pansies and just dried them. So I have I'm like quick results. So I have a microwave flower press where you put it between some sheets and it's got a special microwave thing. And so I can make these in about a minute and a half of microwaving and it's dry. You can also press between books and like sort of old school, maybe you did as a kid, press. And so this is a gift actually for Telly-Ann because she takes care of and planted so many of our flowers, and so this is for you. So then you know you could, sure, thank you Telly-Ann. So this kind of remember the summer or winter of this past year and all the beautiful flowers. You can dry so many cool flowers and stuff that we have growing. And many flowers are dye plants, and so there's so much more you can do with what grows in your garden. So that's what I hope to do today, was just give some ideas, inspiration, different ways you can kind of utilize your garden and make things go even further. So thank you.